This is Alex Mercer, and tonight we're talking about a disaster that begins without noise, without violence, without a single building shaking or a single glass falling from a shelf. It begins far from where anyone is watching, deep beneath the surface of the ocean, in a place no camera can reach and no human can feel. Thousands of meters below the waves, tectonic plates that have been locked together for centuries finally give way. There is no warning tremor on land, no dramatic rupture felt by sleeping cities. Instead, the Earth shifts in silence, releasing an amount of energy that defies intuition. The planet exhales, slowly at first, as if testing the consequences of its own movement. Above the rupture, the ocean surface looks unchanged. Ships continue their routes. Coastal towns go about their routines. Life, for now, remains unaware. In laboratories and monitoring stations around the world, the first signs appear not as panic, but as confusion. Seismographs begin to register something unusual, signals that don't align with ordinary activity. Lines spike, then hold. Data streams stutter, then freeze altogether under the weight of what they're trying to record. Scientists stare at screens, recalibrating instruments, checking for errors, assuming malfunction before accepting the truth. This isn't a shallow quake. This isn't regional. This is massive, deep, and far more dangerous than anything that would have rattled buildings on land. The silence of the event is what makes it terrifying. An earthquake that no one feels is not harmless. It is simply patient. As the data stabilizes, a clearer picture emerges, and it is worse than anyone hoped. The rupture stretches for miles, possibly hundreds of miles, along a fault line that has not released this kind of energy in recorded history. The displacement isn't violent upward motion. It's a slow, powerful vertical shift of the sea floor itself. Entire sections of the ocean floor have risen or fallen by meters in a matter of seconds. The water above them hasn't reacted yet, but physics guarantees that it will. The ocean does not absorb change quietly. It remembers, and it responds. Out on the open sea, nothing seems wrong. The wave that is forming is not visible in the way people expect waves to be. It doesn't rise dramatically. It doesn't crest or break. It moves outward in all directions, a vast, nearly imperceptible bulge spreading across the ocean basin at the speed of a jet aircraft. Ships pass over it without noticing. Satellites detect subtle changes in sea level, so small they would be dismissed under any other circumstances. But this wave is not meant for the deep ocean. It is being shaped for the shallows, for coastlines, for land that does not yet realize it has been marked. Back on shore, the day continues. People commute. Markets open. Children go to school. The sea looks calm, even beautiful in places. There is no instinctual fear because nothing feels wrong. Humans are conditioned to respond to sound, to motion, to impact. This disaster offers none of that. It advances invisibly, quietly, efficiently. Somewhere, emergency management officials begin to receive fragmented alerts. The language is cautious. Probabilities are calculated. Scenarios are modeled. No one wants to overreact. No one wants to be responsible for panic. And so time slips by minute, while the ocean carries the consequences of that silent rupture closer to shore. In coastal research centers, the realization finally settles in. This was not just an earthquake. This was a trigger. The ocean floor has shifted in a way that displaces an unimaginable volume of water, and that water has only one option: to move. Models update rapidly now, each one worse than the last. Arrival times are calculated. Impact zones expand. What was once an abstract possibility becomes a timeline. The question is no longer if something is coming, but how much time remains before people notice the sea behaving strangely, and whether they will understand what that behavior means. There is a particular kind of dread that comes with delayed catastrophe. It is not the panic of impact, but the awareness of inevitability. Scientists know what is happening long before the public does, and that knowledge weighs heavily. They understand that by the time the ocean shows visible signs, by the time the water pulls back or rises unnaturally, the margin for survival will already be narrow. The disaster is already in motion, already decided by forces beyond human intervention. All that remains uncertain is how prepared people will be when reality finally announces itself. As the wave continues its journey, the planet feels indifferent. The sky remains unchanged. The horizon looks stable. The Earth gives no emotional cue, no warning flare. This is not a disaster that screams. It whispers until it no longer has to. Somewhere out there, beneath miles of dark water, the Earth has already made its decision, and millions of people, still unaware, are standing on land that is about to learn what that decision means. This is Alex Mercer, and the most dangerous warning a tsunami ever gives is not noise, not shaking ground, not an alarm cutting through the air. It is silence paired with absence. Along coastlines across the world, the sea begins to behave in a way that feels wrong before it feels frightening. The water doesn't crash or surge. It retreats. Slowly at first, then with growing urgency, pulling away from the shore as if drawn backward by an invisible force. The shoreline stretches outward, revealing dark, glistening seabed that has not seen daylight in generations. Rocks, coral, and debris emerge where waves once rolled. The ocean floor looks ancient, raw, and exposed, like something that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. Boats resting near harbors begin to tilt at awkward angles, their hulls scraping against sand instead of floating freely. Ropes go slack. Docks creak under unfamiliar pressure. Fish thrash helplessly on wet ground, their movements frantic and desperate. A living warning written in motion that most people don't yet understand. The air smells different, heavier, sharper with salt and decay. The sea, which usually advances and retreats with predictable rhythm, has broken its own rules. And still, there is no panic yet. Only confusion. People gather where the water once was. Curiosity overrides caution. Phones are raised, cameras roll, children point, adults speculate. Some laugh nervously, treating the moment like an unexpected gift, a rare glimpse behind the curtain of nature. Social media fills with videos titled with wonder instead of fear. Look how far the water went. I've never seen this before. This is incredible. The human instinct to document replaces the instinct to flee. No one runs from something that feels quiet, slow, and strangely beautiful. Time stretches during this moment. Seconds feel longer. The ocean seems to hold its breath. Waves are gone, replaced by stillness so complete it feels unnatural. The horizon looks unchanged, but the foreground tells a different story. One of absence, of loss, of a boundary erased. The sea has not simply gone out with the tide. It has been pulled back, displaced by something vast and violent moving beneath the surface far beyond sight. The water is not leaving, it is being gathered. Some people sense that something is wrong, though they cannot name it. A discomfort settles in the chest. The silence feels heavy. Birds stop calling. The wind carries sound farther than it should. There is an unspoken tension, as if the land itself is aware of what is coming. But without context, without education, without memory, instinct fails. Humanity has lived long enough without facing this exact moment that the warning feels unfamiliar, almost unreal. Far offshore, the wave is still forming, still accelerating, still invisible to those standing on exposed seabed. It does not announce itself. It does not roar yet. It grows taller as it approaches shallower water, compressing energy that has traveled hundreds of miles. The retreating ocean is not a sign of safety. It is the inhale before impact. The sea is pulling itself back like a stretched muscle, storing power that will soon be released all at once. Emergency alerts, if they come at all, arrive late or half understood. Sirens blend into ambient noise. Messages are misread, ignored, or doubted. Some people hesitate, unsure whether they're witnessing danger or an anomaly. Others refuse to believe that something so calm could turn violent. The mind resists the idea that devastation can arrive quietly. Humans expect disaster to look dangerous before it becomes deadly. And then there are those who understand. A few recognize the signs, their knowledge rooted in history, training, or stories passed down through generations. Their reactions are immediate and urgent. They shout warnings that cut through the stillness. They run inland, uphill, anywhere higher than where they are standing. But urgency is contagious only when belief follows, and belief is slow to form when the sea looks peaceful and the sky remains clear. The most tragic element of this moment is not the power of nature. It is the pause. This brief window where escape is possible, but recognition is not. Where the difference between life and death is measured not in strength or speed, but in understanding. The ocean has already decided what comes next. The land has no defense. The only variable left is human response, and it is unfolding in slow motion. As the water continues to pull away, it exposes more than seabed. It exposes how unprepared the modern world is for ancient threats. Coastal development has erased natural warning signs. Education has faded. Generational memory has been replaced by confidence in technology and alerts that arrive too late. People trust that someone else will tell them when to run. But the ocean does not wait for permission. This is the most deceptive moment of the entire disaster. The calm before impact. The illusion of safety. The belief that nothing catastrophic begins so quietly. The sea has gone silent, not because the danger has passed, but because it is concentrating itself into something unstoppable. And in this stillness, as people stand where the ocean once was, the future is already rushing toward them. This is Alex Mercer, and what witnesses struggle to describe afterward is not a wave in the way we normally understand one, but a presence, something vast enough to distort perspective itself. Far out at sea, where the horizon usually feels infinite and calm, something begins to rise. At first, it doesn't look like motion at all. The line where sky meets water appears thicker, darker, heavier. Sailors, pilots, and people standing on high ground notice it simultaneously, not because it moves fast, but because it feels wrong. The horizon is not supposed to change shape, and yet, slowly, unmistakably, it does. This is not a single crest curling toward shore. It is an entire section of ocean lifting itself upward, miles wide, stretching left and right beyond what the eye can follow. There is no dramatic roar yet, no spray thrown into the air. The wave advances with quiet certainty, carrying the weight of the seafloor's sudden movement within it. It does not rush. It does not hesitate. It simply comes forward, pushed by physics older and stronger than anything humans have ever built. As it travels into shallower water, the transformation becomes terrifyingly clear. The energy that once spread harmlessly through deep ocean has nowhere to go now. The water compresses, rises, steepens. What was once an invisible swell becomes a towering mass, climbing higher with every second. The sea seems to stand up. Gravity pulls it forward, momentum forces it upward, and the coastline ahead offers no resistance strong enough to matter. This is no longer water responding to wind or tide. This is the planet correcting itself. Those who see it from a distance struggle to process what they're witnessing. The human brain searches for scale and fails. Buildings, ships, cliffs, all the reference points we rely on, become meaningless when placed beside something this immense. The wave does not feel fast until suddenly it is. It does not feel loud until the sound finally reaches land, a deep, low roar that vibrates through the ground before the water ever arrives. By the time the noise is unmistakable, time is already gone. Closer to shore, panic finally replaces curiosity. People turn and run, not because they fully understand what's coming, but because instinct finally overwhelms disbelief. The ocean, once a distant backdrop, has become a moving wall, blotting out the horizon itself. There is nowhere to hide in flat terrain. Roads clog instantly. Vehicles stall. The sheer scale of the wave makes human movement feel small, fragile, almost symbolic. This is not a race that can be won by speed alone. As the wave closes in, its surface changes. What looked smooth from afar reveals chaos up close. Boiling water, debris already caught in its grip, fragments of boats, docks, and structures lifted effortlessly. The water darkens, heavy with sediment torn from the seafloor. This is not clean ocean water anymore. It is the ocean carrying the world with it. Every object in its path becomes ammunition, every structure a temporary obstacle at best. The moment of impact is not a single instant. It is a process. The wave does not crash and retreat like a storm surge. It surges forward relentlessly, climbing over seawalls as if they don't exist, swallowing beaches, roads, and buildings in one continuous motion. The force behind it is unimaginable. Concrete fractures, steel bends. Entire neighborhoods are lifted, shifted, erased. The water moves inland with the confidence of something that knows it cannot be stopped. For those caught in its path, the experience defies language. There is no up or down, no clear direction, only pressure and motion. The sound is everywhere and nowhere at once. Breathing becomes impossible. Darkness replaces light as debris fills the water. Survival becomes a matter of chance, of where one was standing at the exact second the wave arrived. Strength means nothing against something this large. Preparation means everything, and even that is often not enough. Further inland, people who believed distance meant safety hear the sound before they see the water. Rivers reverse direction. Valleys funnel the surge deeper into land. Places that have never seen salt water are suddenly drowning in it. The wave does not respect maps, borders, or assumptions. It rewrites geography in real time, carving new paths through land that believed itself permanent. From above, the scene looks unreal. The coastline is no longer a line, but a blurred, shifting boundary between land and sea. The wave stretches across entire regions, its edge irregular and violent, consuming everything in front of it. Satellites capture images that will later be studied in disbelief, proof that the ocean, given the right conditions, can move continents of human effort aside in minutes. And still, the wave keeps coming. This is not a single blow, but a sustained assault, a transfer of energy that takes time to fully release. Even as the first surge pushes inland, the ocean behind it continues to rise, feeding the destruction. The land absorbs what it can, then gives way. The concept of resistance becomes meaningless. This is the moment the world understands what the earlier silence was hiding. The quiet retreat of the ocean, the exposed seabed, the stillness that felt almost peaceful. All of it was preparation for this overwhelming, unstoppable convergence of water, gravity, and time. The wave that reached the horizon was never just a wave. It was the earth reminding humanity of scale, of power, and of how small we truly are when the planet decides to move. This is Alex Mercer, and when the warnings finally arrive, they do not feel like rescue. They feel like accusation. Sirens erupt across coastlines with a sound that cuts through conversation, through traffic, through denial itself. Phones vibrate almost simultaneously, screens lighting up with emergency alerts written in stark language that leaves no room for interpretation. Tsunami warning. Evacuate immediately. Seek high ground. But by the time these words are read, time has already been spent. The ocean has already moved. The window that once felt generous has narrowed to seconds, and the world begins to understand that preparation and reaction are not the same thing. Evacuation routes clog instantly, not because people are slow, but because there are too many of them and too little space. Roads designed for daily commutes are suddenly expected to carry entire populations at once. Intersections freeze. Vehicles stall bumper to bumper. Some drivers abandon their cars, choosing their own legs over immobile steel. Others stay put, trapped by indecision or the hope that traffic will clear just enough to matter. Sirens continue to wail, but they no longer guide. They overwhelm. People react in wildly different ways, and none of them feel logical in the moment. Some run the instant they hear the warning, adrenaline overriding fear, instinct screaming that movement is survival. Others freeze completely, rooted to the spot by disbelief. The brain struggles to reconcile the calm sky above with the catastrophic message on a phone screen. How can something this terrible be happening when everything still looks normal? That delay, those few seconds spent questioning reality, becomes the most dangerous pause of all. Families fracture under pressure. Parents shout names into crowds. Hands slip apart. Plans that once felt solid dissolve immediately. Meet at the car becomes impossible when the car is unreachable. Go to the hill loses meaning when everyone is trying to reach the same elevation at once. People make decisions without knowing if they are right, because there is no time left to reconsider. Every choice feels final, even when it's made in confusion. Emergency services try to maintain order, but they are overwhelmed before they can begin. Instructions blare from loudspeakers, but they compete with sirens, engines, voices, and fear. Some people obey every command exactly. Others ignore them entirely, convinced that personal judgment will serve them better than distant authority. In moments like these, trust fractures. People no longer know which voice to follow, only that time is slipping away faster than they can think. There are those who refuse to believe the warnings at all, not out of ignorance but out of self-protection. Accepting the reality of what's coming feels unbearable, so denial becomes a temporary shelter. They wait for visual confirmation. They wait for the ocean to look dangerous. They wait for proof. And in doing so, they gamble everything on the hope that this time, the warning is wrong. As the minutes collapse into seconds, instinct takes over where reason fails. People run uphill without knowing how high is high enough. They climb buildings, trees, anything that lifts them above the ground. Others are trapped by circumstance, mobility issues, responsibility for others, physical barriers that cannot be crossed quickly enough. The cruel truth of disasters like this is that survival is not evenly distributed. It favors proximity, awareness, and chance as much as strength or courage. Phones keep buzzing, but the alerts no longer bring clarity. They repeat instructions that feel impossible to follow now. Social media fills with fragments, panicked messages, unanswered calls, location pins dropped without explanation. Communication becomes noise, and noise becomes pressure. The human mind is not built to process this many life or death variables at once. Panic doesn't erupt because people are irrational. It erupts because reality has outpaced comprehension. Somewhere nearby, the sound changes. A low roar begins to bleed into the chaos, subtle at first, almost mistaken for wind or distant traffic. Those who hear it feel something cold settle in their chest. This is not an alarm. This is not human-made. This is the sound of mass in motion. The ocean announcing itself at last. At this point, there are no more choices, only reactions. People run because standing still feels worse. They climb because there is nowhere else to go. They shout warnings even when they know it may already be too late. The final seconds stretch unnaturally, as if time itself is hesitating, offering one last cruel illusion of possibility. When the water finally arrives, it does not distinguish between those who believed and those who didn't. It does not reward calm or punish fear. It simply follows physics, gravity, and momentum. The chaos that preceded it was not failure. It was humanity colliding with the limits of control. The realization that technology, planning, and confidence can all be rendered meaningless by a force that does not negotiate. In the aftermath, people will ask what went wrong. Why didn't everyone evacuate sooner? Why did some hesitate? Why weren't the warnings enough? But in these final moments before impact, the truth is simpler and more painful. The difference between survival and disaster was not knowledge alone. It was seconds, decisions made under pressure, paths taken or missed, and luck, pure, unforgiving luck. This is the part of the story that never looks clean in hindsight. The part where humanity does not fail because it panics, but because it is human, limited, emotional, and slow to accept the unimaginable. Sirens sounded, warnings were given, and still, time ran out. When the wave hits, it does not arrive as a single moment of impact. It arrives as an ending. The first contact is almost deceptively quiet. A sudden surge where streets once existed, water forcing its way into places that were never meant to feel the ocean. Then the pressure builds. Concrete fractures with sounds that feel too deep to be real. Glass explodes outward in glittering clouds. Steel bends, not slowly, but decisively, as if the laws of engineering have been rewritten mid-sentence. Buildings that once symbolized permanence, banks, offices, homes passed down through generations, begin to fail not one by one, but together, collapsing into the same moving mass of debris and water. Streets lose their identity first. Curbs vanish. Lane markings dissolve. What was once a grid becomes a current. Cars lift as if weightless, colliding with storefronts, trees, streetlights, each impact adding more debris to the flow. Entire blocks detach from the idea of place and become cargo, carried wherever gravity and momentum decide. The wave does not carve a path. It consumes everything equally, turning the city into raw material. Landmarks disappear in seconds. A bridge that once carried thousands each day folds inward, not from weakness, but from force no design anticipated. A stadium fills and then collapses, its vastness meaningless against the volume of water pouring through it. Towers vanish not with a dramatic fall, but with a sinking motion, swallowed from the bottom up, as if the ground itself has given up its claim. People later struggled to explain how something so familiar could be gone so completely, so fast. The sound is overwhelming, an endless roar layered with impacts, tearing, crushing, and the deep, concussive noise of structures giving way. It is not chaos in the sense of randomness. It is chaos with direction. Everything moves inland, then sideways, then back again, as the water churns and redirects itself, dragging the city through multiple deaths in the span of minutes. What survives the initial surge is often torn apart by the return pull, as the ocean reclaims what it carried too far. Inside the water, orientation becomes impossible. There is no up, no down, only pressure and motion. Rooms are ripped open, walls peeled away, interiors exposed for a fraction of a second before being erased. The city's private life, photographs, furniture, records, personal histories, mixes together into an indistinguishable mass. Memory itself feels like it is being physically destroyed. And then, just as violently as it arrived, the water begins to recede. But it does not leave the city intact. It leaves behind absence. Where neighborhoods stood, there is now a flattened expanse of mud, wreckage, and silence. Streets end abruptly. Buildings are reduced to foundations or vanish entirely, leaving nothing to suggest they were ever there. The city is not damaged. It is unrecognizable. Maps become useless. Names lose meaning. Survivors struggle to describe what they are looking at, because language was built for continuity, not erasure. What remains afterward feels wrong, too open, too quiet. The skyline is broken not just physically, but conceptually. The idea that this place was once alive, busy, predictable feels like a distant story. The city didn't slowly decline. It didn't burn or decay. It vanished in minutes, leaving behind a landscape that feels more like aftermath than location. A place that no longer remembers itself. The danger does not stop when the water reaches land. That assumption, deeply ingrained, quietly trusted, collapses almost immediately. The surge does not respect the shoreline as a boundary. It follows rivers upstream, floods valleys, pours into low-lying plains with the same relentless force it showed at the coast. The wave stretches itself across geography, adapting to terrain, accelerating through narrow channels, spreading wide across flat land. Distance, once considered protection, becomes irrelevant. Communities miles from the ocean feel the ground tremble beneath water they never imagined reaching them. Rivers reverse direction. Flood defenses designed for seasonal overflow fail instantly, overwhelmed by volume and speed beyond any historical precedent. Water pours over embankments, through culverts, across highways that were never meant to serve as barriers. Infrastructure built with confidence in old risk models collapses under new reality. Emergency plans unravel. Evacuation routes lead into flood zones. Shelters designated as safe become islands, then traps. Communication systems fail as towers fall and power grids short out. The assumption that inland areas can absorb displaced populations collapses when those areas are also underwater. The scale of the disaster expands outward faster than response systems can adapt, creating layers of crisis instead of a single front. People who believed they had time realized the warning was not about proximity, but about scale. The wave does not announce itself differently inland. It arrives through rivers that rise too fast, through drainage systems that turn into conduits, through land that was never reinforced because no one believed it would need to be. The realization spreads with the water itself. There is no clear line where danger ends. Geography becomes unreliable. Elevation maps prove outdated. Floodplains expand beyond their historical limits. Areas once considered natural buffers, wetlands, forests, open fields, are overwhelmed, not because they failed, but because the force moving through them was never accounted for. The landscape itself seems complicit, reshaping under pressure in ways that feel intentional, though they are not. As the water spreads inland, it carries more than destruction. It carries debris from the coast, pieces of cities, fragments of ships, industrial materials, and the invisible contaminants that ride along with them. Farmland is poisoned. Wells are contaminated. Soil is compacted and stripped of fertility. Even where the water eventually recedes, it leaves behind damage that cannot be undone by drying out. The psychological shift is immediate and profound. The idea of safe zones fractures. Trust in distance dissolves. People begin to understand that this was not a coastal disaster that spilled over. It was a regional transformation, a redefinition of what risk means in a world where extremes are no longer confined to expected boundaries. Inland cities that once served as refugees now face their own reckonings. Transportation hubs are overwhelmed. Resources thin. Temporary shelters stretch into long-term displacement zones. The social strain becomes visible as systems designed for support are asked to absorb loss on a scale they were never meant to handle. The wave has passed, but instability continues to ripple outward. What lingers most is the loss of certainty. The map that once guided evacuation, planning, and growth no longer feels trustworthy. The old assumptions about where water can go, how far danger can reach, what inland even means, are gone. In their place is a quiet, unsettling truth. Safety is no longer a fixed location. It is temporary, conditional, and constantly shifting. When the water finally settles, it leaves behind more than wreckage. It leaves a transformed understanding of space, risk, and permanence. The city that vanished is not the only casualty. The idea that geography alone can protect us disappears with it. This is Alex Mercer, and just when the world begins to think the worst has passed, the ocean reminds us that disasters are rarely singular. The first wave, overwhelming and indiscriminate, has already redefined landscapes, erased neighborhoods, and fractured lives. Yet, minutes later, the sea rises again. Relentless, indifferent, and often higher than before. There is no pause, no mercy. Those who believed they had survived the initial surge find themselves caught in a new current of terror. The water does not merely repeat itself, it escalates. It arrives carrying debris, oil, pieces of infrastructure, and the weight of the Earth's deep anger, moving in ways impossible to anticipate. For survivors, this second assault feels like betrayal. There is a moment of disbelief where the mind searches for logic, for some explanation that this cannot be happening again. But logic fails here. Time itself becomes distorted. Seconds stretch, then collapse, as people scramble to move, climb, or grasp whatever floating support they can find. Families are torn apart in moments. Children who clung to parents are separated by water, the flow pushing them away faster than hands can reach. The cycle repeats with merciless precision. Water recedes only to return, dragging the familiar world into unfamiliarity. Streets that were briefly visible vanish again. Buildings that seemed stable begin to shift and crumble under renewed pressure. Every return wave carries more than water. It carries despair. Even emergency services, stretched thin by the first surge, struggle to adapt. Boats launched to reach trapped civilians are overturned. Debris blocks roadways, and communications fail in the chaos. Signals of hope, the idea that rescue or relief is possible, become almost meaningless. Every passing moment feels both infinitely long and devastatingly short. Those on rooftops, hills, or floating debris must recalibrate their expectations of safety constantly. Survival is no longer about physical capability alone. It becomes a test of endurance, perception, and raw instinct. Psychologically, the repeated surges do more than destroy infrastructure. They undermine human stability. People who manage to escape the first wave feel dizzy, disoriented, and powerless in the face of repetition. Each new swell reinforces the terrifying truth that nothing is final. The ocean does not act with intention, but its movement writes a cruel narrative nonetheless. Hope is temporary, and security is an illusion. Individuals begin to calculate not if they will survive, but whether they can withstand another wave. Every retreating current leaves traces of chaos, pulling debris, corpses, and remnants of human habitation back into its depths, only to redeposit them inland again. Each cycle further destabilizes communities and families alike. Observation points, where people hoped to monitor the water's progress safely, become unreliable. Hills, elevated roads, and makeshift platforms are reached by water they were not designed to endure. The wave adapts to topography, finding valleys, riverbeds, and depressions to amplify its reach. People find themselves retreating further inland or upward repeatedly, never certain if this new location will remain dry. The ocean, patient and tireless, moves with a rhythm older than human planning, reminding everyone that control over nature is ultimately an illusion. Even when the tide finally begins to settle, there is no relief. Water has altered the terrain permanently, creating channels, depressions, and barriers that did not exist moments ago. Debris piles up like new landscapes. Roads, buildings, and familiar pathways have disappeared. The environment itself becomes hostile. The first wave took what was there. The second wave changed what remains. The world that people thought they survived is no longer recognizable. Darkness arrives as if nature itself understands the limits of human endurance. Night transforms disaster into a theater of shadows, where the remnants of the city are silhouetted against churning water, burning wreckage, and fragmented lights. The absence of power intensifies fear. Streets are no longer visible. Debris floats silently, threatening anyone who ventures too close. Fires flare unpredictably, consuming what little is left of buildings, adding smoke, heat, and sparks to the already chaotic scene. Night amplifies every uncertainty, every threat, every sound. A single splash, a distant shout, or the distant roar of water can feel like an immediate danger. Survivors cling to whatever high ground they can find. Rooftops, hills, floating debris, partially submerged structures. Every movement is measured. Every sound is interpreted as a potential threat. Conversations are whispers, almost afraid to disturb the fragile silence that remains. The darkness magnifies anxiety, leaving imagination to fill in gaps where vision fails. People imagine what they cannot see. Structures collapsing unseen, neighbors swept away, more waves gathering momentum. Fear becomes tangible, almost solid, pressing against the body like water itself. Communication is fractured. Phones fail, radios are overwhelmed, and emergency networks are disrupted. People attempt to reach loved ones, but often find silence in return. The inability to confirm safety multiplies stress. The night becomes a labyrinth of unknowns, where every step could bring either refuge or disaster. Even for those who are physically safe for the moment, the psychological toll is immense. Sleep is impossible. The human mind cannot rest when survival is precarious and the threat of another wave looms constantly. Night also amplifies scale. The ocean seems larger, its presence more oppressive, more sentient. Moonlight glints off churning debris, reflecting off waves that seem to stretch endlessly. Sound carries unnaturally. Water moving, metal straining, distant cries echoing across floodwaters. Those on rooftops or hills watch helplessly as the landscape continues to change, sometimes in ways they cannot fully comprehend. Geography itself feels fluid. Elevation is uncertain. Familiar landmarks vanish in darkness and flood. Maps and planning are rendered useless in the shifting reality. The psychological burden is compounded by exhaustion. Bodies ache from climbing, floating, holding on to anything that will prevent being swept away. Minds ache from uncertainty, the constant calculation of risk, the dread of discovering another wave is forming somewhere beyond the horizon. The night becomes a pressure cooker, compressing trauma, fear, and helplessness into every passing minute. For survivors, dawn will not bring relief. It will bring the next challenge, the next realization of scale, and the next assessment of survival. And yet, amidst the terror, there are flickers of human resilience. Small acts of aid, guidance, and protection appear spontaneously. Strangers reach for one another, share floating debris, or lift children above water. Makeshift signals are improvised in the darkness to attract attention. Even when survival feels impossible, humans cling to hope as stubbornly as the sea clings to momentum. The night, vast and threatening, tests endurance, ingenuity, and solidarity. By the time the first hints of dawn appear on a broken coastline, the night has already rewritten what survival means. Water has claimed land, structures, and routine. Darkness has exposed the limits of human control. The ocean's cycles have demonstrated that destruction is not a single event, but an ongoing presence. The broken coast is no longer a temporary scene. It is a permanent alteration of the world, a reminder that nature cannot be contained, only endured. When the ocean finally recedes, the world it leaves behind is unrecognizable. Streets are gone, swallowed by the wave or transformed into rivers of debris. Buildings that once defined neighborhoods are flattened or twisted into forms that defy comprehension. Bridges collapse into jagged splinters over broken roads. Vehicles, fragments of homes, shipping containers, and unidentifiable objects float in pools of water or are jammed against structures, creating a surreal labyrinth. The scale of destruction overwhelms even those trained to face disaster. Silence follows the roar. It is not peace. It is the hushed, heavy breath of a world that has been fundamentally altered. Search and rescue teams move cautiously, every step a negotiation with uncertainty. Each footprint in mud, each broken doorway, each partially submerged staircase holds the potential for life or tragedy. Rescuers wade through knee-deep water in streets that once thrummed with daily life. They climb over rubble, swing from splintered beams, and squeeze through narrow openings to reach those trapped beneath. Every discovery, a hand sticking from wreckage, a flash of clothing, sparks a surge of adrenaline and dread. Hope and heartbreak are inseparable companions here. Every moment contains both, intertwined in ways that defy logic and exhaust the soul. Survivors navigate the transformed landscape with equal caution and desperation. Streets that were familiar a day ago are now twisted pathways, sometimes completely submerged, sometimes reduced to rubble. Families call out names into the silence, their voices swallowed by vast empty spaces or by water sluicing through broken structures. They search for loved ones they may never see again, for possessions that no longer exist, for landmarks that the ocean has taken or reshaped. Every discovery is a small victory or a crushing loss, and the emotional toll begins to settle on hearts like a second, heavier wave. In some neighborhoods, survivors find remnants of normalcy amid ruin, a half-buried bicycle, a floating toy, a single photograph clinging to a wall. These fragments anchor memory, grief, and hope simultaneously. People cling to them as evidence that life existed here, that someone, somewhere, might have survived. But these signs are fragile. One misstep, one shift of debris, and everything can vanish again. The ground itself has become unpredictable, an extension of the ocean's will. Every rescue operation faces logistical impossibilities. Water, mud, and debris limit access. Vehicles cannot navigate the new topography. Emergency shelters may be destroyed or unreachable. Survivors must make do with what they can reach, and rescuers must improvise constantly. Portable boats, drones, makeshift rafts, and ropes become the instruments of survival. The physical effort is grueling, but the psychological strain is heavier. Each successful rescue is a triumph, yes, but every failure lingers, haunting those who remain and reminding everyone that not all stories end in reunion. Communication networks are fragmented, if not entirely gone. Families separated by distance struggle to find each other. Rumors, fragmented messages, and misreported locations multiply panic. In this vacuum, people create their own networks, shouting across streets, using reflective signals, banging on debris, or waving cloths. Small communities form spontaneously, bound by urgency and shared danger. Every action is an attempt to reclaim human connection in a world where both physical and emotional landscapes have been violently rearranged. The emotional weight is impossible to quantify. Shock, grief, exhaustion, and the faint pulse of hope coexist in every movement. Some survivors wander aimlessly, stunned into inactivity. Others move with determination born of necessity, searching for family, shelter, or simply a path forward. Children, if they survive, carry trauma in silence, learning grief and loss in ways no one should. The ocean has changed the world physically, but it has also altered the very fabric of human consciousness, imprinting a lesson about fragility, resilience, and the unpredictability of nature that will last a lifetime. While coastal cities reel from devastation, the consequences of the tsunami spread outward with startling speed. Ports, once bustling with commerce, trade, and connection, are destroyed or submerged. Shipping lanes are blocked by debris, sunken vessels, or damaged infrastructure. Warehouses collapse. The immediate logistics of global trade grind to a halt. Countries that rely on imports for food, medicine, and fuel feel the impact within days. The ocean's reach is no longer measured in miles. It is measured in dependence, connection, and the fragile web of civilization. Economic instability spreads like a contagion. Stock markets react violently. Industries that depend on timely transportation face cascading failures, and supply chains collapse under the strain. Even nations far from the affected coastlines cannot escape the consequences. Fuel prices spike. Food shortages appear. Medical supplies are delayed, creating urgent humanitarian needs. Economists scramble to assess damage, but the scale is unprecedented. The tsunami, though local in its physical presence, generates waves of uncertainty and scarcity, that ripple globally. Humanitarian crises intensify as displaced populations attempt to move inland or across borders. Refugees, already traumatized by loss, face new challenges: overcrowded shelters, limited medical care, and strained resources. International aid organizations struggle to coordinate relief in a world where communication is fractured, roads are impassable, and ports are unusable. Every day becomes a balancing act between supply and demand, hope and despair. The ocean's destruction has triggered a secondary crisis of logistics, governance, and human endurance. The psychological impact of a globally interconnected disaster cannot be overstated. Citizens in distant nations follow the news, watching footage of destruction and displacement, and feel both empathy and vulnerability. Panic and anxiety spread across borders as people realize that no one is immune from global dependencies. Even those who have not experienced the wave firsthand feel a loss of control, as the disaster illustrates that infrastructure, markets, and supply chains are fragile, and civilization itself can wobble under the weight of natural forces. Global response efforts highlight the limits of planning. Relief must travel long distances, navigating damaged infrastructure and limited transportation. Nations compete for resources while trying to aid one another. International coordination is tested to its limits. Lessons that previously existed in theory about disaster preparedness, climate risk, and emergency logistics are rewritten in real time, as leaders confront an event that exceeds expectation and imagination. In the long term, societies must contend with reconstruction, compensation, and economic recovery. Jobs are lost, businesses destroyed, and investments wiped out overnight. Communities are forced to rebuild on landscapes altered irrevocably by the ocean. mental health crises emerge, with trauma spreading both among direct survivors and populations indirectly affected by the global shockwave. Governments must not only restore infrastructure, but also manage human resilience, trust, and hope. Recovery is not just technical, it is deeply emotional and social. The tsunami demonstrates a chilling truth. Local disasters are rarely contained by geography. In a world bound by commerce, communication, and interdependence, the fall of one city reverberates across continents. What begins as a wall of water striking a coastline becomes a lesson in fragility, demonstrating that survival is intertwined with every connection, every dependence, and every unseen link between people, resources, and the global ecosystem. As humanity begins to respond, the scale of the event prompts reflection on mortality, vulnerability, and the limits of human control. The disaster is not only a physical event, it is a systemic awakening, revealing weaknesses in infrastructure, governance, and preparedness that have long been assumed stable. The shockwave is both literal and metaphorical, leaving a mark that extends far beyond the waterline and into the global consciousness. Even after the waters recede, their presence lingers in ways far more insidious than debris or destroyed buildings. Survivors find themselves haunted by the ocean long after it stops moving. A sudden storm sends a shiver through the spine. The sound of distant waves triggers memories of chaos, of streets transformed into rivers, of rooftops that became lifeboats. Sleep becomes fractured. Dreams carry the weight of water, collapsing structures, and the desperate faces of loved ones. The mind refuses to let go, as though trying to replay the disaster until every lesson is learned, or perhaps as a punishment for having survived. Trauma does not respect proximity. Even those who lived miles away, who felt only distant tremors or received the news after the fact, find their minds invaded by images of destruction. News footage, social media posts, and radio broadcasts convey more than facts. They convey emotion, panic, despair, and the tangible sense of helplessness. Communities far from the epicenter experience a second wave of psychological impact, a collective grief transmitted through images and stories. Anxiety spreads across societies like a subtle tsunami, invisible but undeniable, altering routines, behaviors, and trust. People flinch at sounds that resemble sirens or breaking water. Children startle at rainfall or dripping pipes. Adults wake in panic from minor tremors. The ocean, once associated with leisure, commerce, and livelihood, becomes a source of dread. Its beauty is inseparable from its destruction. The trauma reshapes relationships, mental health, and even community identity. Individuals who once trusted the coastline now see it as an unpredictable adversary. Survivors begin to measure safety not by geography or infrastructure, but by proximity to the next wave, whether real or imagined. Even collective memory transforms. Rituals, memorials, and storytelling become acts of survival, attempts to process the enormity of loss. Communities grieve together, but the grief is layered with anxiety about future threats. The ocean's shadow stretches far beyond the shoreline, affecting cities, towns, and entire nations indirectly. This invisible second wave, emotional and psychological, often outlasts the physical damage. It embeds itself in policy debates, education, and planning, shaping human behavior in ways subtle but profound. As the floodwaters withdraw, communities face a question as old as humanity, but never more urgent. Rebuild or retreat. Streets cleared of debris do not signify safety. Foundations remain weakened, soil salinized, and landscapes altered. Engineers propose reinforced levees, elevated structures, and barriers that promise resilience. Scientists warn that the ocean adapts faster than human calculation, that each solution may only delay the inevitable. Every decision carries the weight of uncertainty, a reminder that survival is provisional and impermanent. Construction becomes a psychological act as much as a technical one. Homeowners rebuild not merely to restore comfort, but to reclaim agency over a life interrupted. Roads are elevated, homes are fortified, communities migrate slightly inland. Yet the anxiety of future disasters shadows every nail driven and every wall erected. Even as bricks and steel rise, the memory of the wave presses down, reminding all that nature is neither permanent nor negotiable. The ocean teaches patience through terror, and humanity responds with courage tinged with doubt. Planning involves more than engineering. Social dynamics shift under the stress of uncertainty. Families debate whether to remain in ancestral towns or abandon them. Schools, hospitals, and businesses must operate while balancing safety and necessity. Children grow up amid these debates, internalizing both resilience and fear. Every reconstruction is a story of survival and adaptation, but also a reminder of fragility. Communities rebuild on borrowed time, acutely aware that the next wave could arrive at any moment, rewriting every decision made. Economic and emotional investments become intertwined. Money spent on mitigation feels simultaneously necessary and futile. People struggle with guilt over what to save, what to let go, and how to prioritize life, safety, and property. Governments intervene, attempting coordination. But local knowledge often conflicts with national strategies. Humanity negotiates with water, negotiating with itself, trying to impose order on a force that inherently defies it. In these acts, resilience becomes as much moral as material, a testament to both human ingenuity and human vulnerability. As reconstruction continues, a question surfaces quietly, persistently, in private thoughts and public discourse. Could this have been avoided? Early warning systems existed in some areas, yet failed to reach everyone. Evacuation plans were sometimes ignored, misunderstood, or implemented too late. Communities debate what measures could have prevented the scale of destruction. The education that was never disseminated, the infrastructure never reinforced, the science dismissed or underestimated. Humanity confronts its relationship with the planet, realizing survival depends not on domination, but understanding, respect, and foresight. Reflection mixes with grief. Policymakers, engineers, and ordinary citizens alike grapple with the enormity of lessons left unlearned. Coastal planning is scrutinized. Climate adaptation and disaster preparedness gain new urgency. Economists and sociologists measure costs not just in dollars, but in human life and lost opportunity. Philosophers and storytellers observe how perception of risk shapes behavior, and how delayed action magnifies consequence. The tsunami, once a local event, now functions as a global moral and practical teacher. Yet there is also humility in this reckoning. Humanity recognizes that no wall, warning, or calculation can fully control nature. The wave was not just a test. It was a reminder of scale, power, and limits. It forces the question of how societies plan for uncertainty, how they build resilience into culture, infrastructure, and mindset. survival is no longer a guarantee of geography, wealth, or knowledge. It is a complex dance with forces that exceed human comprehension. In the end, the tsunami becomes more than disaster. It is a story etched into collective memory, a permanent lesson written in water, loss, and human endurance. The final question, asked too late by some, but in time by others, is a call to understand, adapt, and respect the immense forces that shape life on Earth. It is a reminder that the planet does not negotiate, but humanity must learn to coexist. Those who survived carry the memory of the wave not just in scars and debris, but in the consciousness of what it means to live within the delicate balance between civilization and the raw power of the natural world. The waters have spoken. Cities that once touched the sky now bow beneath their weight. Streets we walked, laughter we shared, and the quiet routines of life, all swept away in moments too fast to comprehend, yet too heavy to forget. The ocean does not care for our plans, our maps, or our expectations. It moves on its own terms, and we are left to witness, to remember, and to endure. In the silence that follows, the true cost is felt, not just in bricks or steel, but in hearts, minds, and the fragile pulse of human hope. Families rebuilt in shadowed corners, communities fractured yet persistent, and individuals who carry memories of loss no one can measure. Trauma lingers like a second tide, quiet but relentless, reminding us that survival is never final, and safety is always borrowed. And yet, amid the ruin, there is a stubborn spark. The human spirit, small and fragile as it may seem against the vastness of the sea, rises. We adapt, we plan, we learn, we grieve, and we remember. Every story of loss becomes a story of resilience. Every empty street, every abandoned home, every vanished skyline is a testament to the power of life to continue even when the world itself seems to have turned against us. Tonight, we have borne witness, not just to destruction, but to what it means to be human, to endure, to hope, and to rebuild in the shadow of forces far greater than ourselves. The waves may return, storms may rise, and chaos may again touch our lives. But through memory, through courage, and through connection, we persist. This is Alex Mercer, signing off from the edge of the flood, from the heart of the storm, from a world changed forever. Hold your loved ones close, honor what was lost, and carry forward the quiet strength that no wave can wash away.